Because in the end, technology is one thing, but it's really about the people participating in that development life cycle, because this is where you draw your ideas from and where you can truly transform your organization.
Welcome to a brand new episode of our podcast, Human in AI, Mind, Machines, and the Gradient Descent.
Thank you for tuning in and joining us on this thrilling adventure as we explore the fascinating field of AI and machine learning. We'll be delving into the craziness of the corporate world, igniting our passion for technology, and examining the crucial role of humans in it all. We are Uli and Abri, your hosts for this episode. Please brace yourself as we unveil our genius mind. Tim Srock, CEO of Mendix, the global leader in low-code for the enterprise. Tim is revolutionizing the application building process for the digital enterprise. Under his leadership, Mendix ensures agility, top-notch solutions, and customer centricity, all in line with his personal mantra, New Day, Same Mission. Get ready to be inspired by Tim as we learn more about him and what's behind the massive success of Mendix. Tim, it's fantastic to have you on the show. And since it's such a cold winter day, let's start off with something to break the ice. So what is it that actually gets you through the cold winter time?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. I would actually say with the increasing tenure at Mendix, my hair gets thinner and thinner, so I need a beanie for my head.
Don't see that.
But I can see it every day when I look in the mirror. So I think beanie is definitely so for my head, and then a good glühwein, I think in the winter times is great. And it's my last working day today, and then I'm going skiing. So skiing and hiking in the winter is something which really clears my mind, where I draw energy from. So really looking forward to next week and get going on the slopes.
Skiing or snowboarding? What is
Skiing.
that? Skiing. There you go. Telemark? No? Old school?
I wish.
I guess then we hope this podcast already serves as a great start to your long-awaited adventure in the mountains. And since we've already learned a little bit about your passion off work, we are also keen to learn more about your passion at work. So where does your passion for low-code actually come from? And how did you become CEO of Mendix? Can you guide us a little bit through?
Yeah, no, I think great question. So my career actually started with Siemens back in 2014. It was a crazy ride so far. So started in the finance excellence program actually. So one of the excellence programs within Siemens, and the goal actually was to become a CFO at the time. So I did basically a 2-year program, 3 assignments. And early on, I focused on digital industries and in particular software. I truly felt like that software can transform how business models, especially now from a finance perspective, would change and evolve, but also how businesses operate. And if you think about digital industry software, it's really about building a digital enterprise, right? And combining the strength of the engineering domain, but also the design domain, and bringing this together, which then is also very important if you think about this convergence of physical and digital. And so that kind of sparked an interest in me and how this is actually evolving Siemens as a company. So I focused early on software. And then I had a short stint also as part of the FFP in corporate finance here in Munich.
FFP is the
Finance Excellence Program. Yeah. And then basically after that short stint here, I rejoined software back in the US in 2017 in the global finance function, where I got heavily involved in the M&A process. And that also was something very interesting if you look at how Siemens has built their software portfolio very much through inorganic. And a couple of acquisitions I was involved in, and one of them was basically Mendix. I have a bit of a feeling that I'm actually the reason why people retire. So when I actually moved to Plano, my predecessor retired. Actually, the same happened in the Mendix job. So the CFO at the time actually also decided to retire, and so that opened up the opportunity to actually join Mendix right after the acquisition, which was a cool opportunity for me because that allowed me actually to work with the founders of Mendix. So all three co-founders were still on board, and it was obviously a very inspiring time working with the co-founders, and one of them was Derek Rose at the time, who was the CEO. And again, he left the company then 3 years in. I hope he doesn't retire. So Derek, if you listen, I hope there is still something in you where you're going to disrupt the world. But yeah, I think it was really about learning from him. And from the team and scaling this organization. So from when I joined and then took on the CEO role, we basically scaled the organization from around 350 people to now more than 1,500. So in 3.5 years. So that's, like I said, crazy ride. And you break a lot of things along the way. But it also allowed me to get involved in very strategic topics, which ultimately then led to the opportunity to take on Mendix as the CEO. Basically now, yeah, it's basically the first anniversary as the CEO, and I really enjoyed that first year. I think being or heading such a very passionate organization, very innovative organization is obviously something which is close to my heart because I like to be curious, I like to learn new things, and I like to build stuff and make stuff. So that's why I think the environment is perfect, but also, I mean, the interaction I now have as part of the CEO role, connecting with customers, connecting with partners, the larger ecosystem. Just came back from reInvent 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I think it's something really, really rewarding. And yeah, I just love my job, and then I'm really passionate about showing up every day.
Yeah, one can truly say that if you have the experience, right, seeing you talking about it, right. But maybe if we shift back, so what is that all about? Can you explain a bit the main offering? What is low code actually about? The main aspects. What is Mendix doing in this game, right? For I think there's some data about, from Forbes, they call it no code, low code, the most disruptive trend of 2021. Gartner says 65% of application will be low code, right? Is that, do you see, obviously it's a big of a bet, right? But do you agree with these kinds of stats that low code is, revolutionizing somehow the digital space?
I think it's definitely revolutionizing, and then I think Siemens is a perfect example of that. I mean, you chatted earlier a bit. We have now more than 600 applications within Siemens, which I think shows the potential. That's kind of a 24-month journey, but also the end users, we reach more than 250,000 end users. So it shows, I think, the possibilities, and that's obviously not the only account we have. So if you think about low-code application development platforms, so we are the innovation leader in that space. You were quoting Gartner. So there's the Gartner MQ, so Magic Quadrant for low-code application platforms, where we are the leader now for the 4th year in a row. So which is very important to us as we also try to obviously draw attention from the outside as people are evaluating. And we are just one of the two pure play low code vendors in that game. So there are really just two pure play low code. There are a lot of no code, low code tools out there, but there are only two true pure low code vendors out there. And our purpose is really about enabling organizations to build better software. It's really about better software, but also faster. So this is really in our core DNA. And how does that actually happen? I think it's, one, through the abstraction of code, right? Of long form code, through the notion of a visualization or visual aspect and modeling. And then it's really about that collaborative aspect of the platform. Because in the end, technology is one thing, but it's really about the people participating in that development lifecycle. Because this is where you draw your ideas from, and where you can truly transform your organization. So from its inception, Mendix was always about kind of blurring the lines, if you will, between business and IT, and bringing those two together to build that software right from the start in the right solution, if you will. So, like I said, this is the core DNA for us. And so with that, by now, we were actually helping more than 4,000 companies to actually go on that journey and digitally disrupt with us together. And I think, again, one thing I want to highlight, it's really about bringing all these personas together in that life cycle. So it's not just about developer It's also about these business experts. It's about UI or designers, right? You bring in and process experts. And if you achieve that, then this is when you truly transform your company and when you tap basically into the entire resource pool you have available in your organization. And yeah, but I feel like we shouldn't just stop at this notion of enabling organization. For us, it's also close to our heart to enable people, so making career changes, becoming change agents in their organization. And it's also about the society, because what you see is that digitization is actually widening the gap even more in society, because people have less access, right, to software or to laptops or PCs, if you want. And so we need to think about how do we close that gap as well. And I truly believe that through low code, we can do that, because, again, we basically increase the pool of resources who can help solve the dearest problems in the world.
What a beautiful notion. And what just stood out to me the most is the universal, inclusive nature of low code, as it makes software development so approachable and accessible to a vast number of people. And this basically already touches upon the vast impact Mendix can have out there, right? And I guess as the CEO, you must be deeply committed about ensuring also a big impact tomorrow and in the future. So maybe can you share a little bit about where you see Mendix in the short term, but also, and I'm very curious about this one, what is your moonshot vision in the long term?
Yeah, I think there are really two things. I think one is about composability, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But composability becomes more and more important, especially if you consider the environment we're in. I think we're in a phase where disruptive trends and kind of outside impacts were never that we're never in that high sequence, right? If you think about it, usually, okay, we had the or the internet crisis, right? Then financial crisis, but now I think we had COVID, energy crisis, war, geopolitical tension. All these things are coming together and then creating that perfect storm. So I think for companies, it's extremely important to be adaptable. So I'll touch on that in a second. And then I think the other aspect, like I said, I mean, you have to think about in an environment where there's war for talent, you see spiking attrition rates. You need to think about, okay, how do you create an environment where people love to contribute, where you can keep them around, but where you also exploit the entire potential you have in your organization. And so if I talk about composability, this is really to develop a mindset how you can adapt your company even quicker to these disruptive trends. And what we see is actually with COVID, I think companies had to reimagine completely how they operate, right? They had to change the way they operate and how they work, so within the company, but also creating digital experiences to interact either with their suppliers and customers. And so we see composability kind of as the next abstraction layer. So it started obviously with code and build, basically providing building blocks to develop. But we see one aspect of that going even one step further, where you think about, Gartner calls it package business capabilities, where you think maybe a business process and package that process could be, I don't know, viewing a 3D visualization of a turbine and using that as a package business capability and then consume it in an application. That again enriches kind of the number of users you can reach with your solution, because now maybe a procurement person can actually access that. But it also increases the level of repeatability in your organization, because a certain component might be used in different factories or for different solutions. And so that's kind of the next abstraction layer we see in low code. And that's something we really strengthen. And the other element we see is that monolithic SaaS applications are actually more and more challenged. We think there's a concept of adaptive solutions. So where you basically have a certain problem, you basically develop a solution, but you have the ability to either integrate with a certain system much easier. And depending on the environment, your system landscape might be different. So you need to think about adaptability. Or you have a solution in your supply chain where you have to adapt to a certain supplier environment much easier. And so the adaptability becomes more and more important especially as we discussed the disruptive changes you're facing. So you need to think about that much more going forward. And so for that, we actually launched what we call an ISV program. So we actually not just help companies to build the composable enterprise, but we also help software companies to build kind of commercial solutions, adaptive solutions, and then go after a certain vertical or after a certain problem. And for that, we actually acquired a company more than a year ago now, which helps those companies to actually think about the right architecture, the right quality, and the right technical foundation, if you will, to build these solutions. So we have a very ecosystem first approach in solving these problems. And in return, that obviously also contributes to the Mendix flywheel, because more solutions means usually that we are stickier with our customers.
Yeah, awesome. Pretty dope. The first time I went into Mendix, get a hand on Mendix was, I don't know, during the pandemic actually, where I saw that in the factory in Amberg, workers actually built their own shift plan, basically, who is in, who is out, right? And you want to push these kinds of empowering of using data-driven analytics, somehow insights in a very tangible manner in this case, right? As close to the people and close to the process as much as possible. And that's like there seems to be already credibility if everybody somehow democratizes, right, and say like, hey, I'm thinking about how to digitize my thoughts, my domain know-how, my sometimes process or my Excel sheet somehow, right? In terms of shift planning, I thought it's quite nice hitting in the middle of the pandemic. These kinds
Yeah,
of
absolutely. And I think that's the second aspect, right? The people aspect I was touching on. I mean, that the collaborative aspect is one, obviously, that business and IT can work together. So that exactly what you said, tapping into that domain expertise, actually of the factory workers, but also then doing that side by side with IT. Not that IT goes off and comes back in 6 months and tells you, okay, that's the solution. But no, you're actually part of sprint reviews, right? You're actually the product owner, or you can give feedback in the application. You can quickly ideate on the problem. I think that's the power. But what we especially also see in the environment, or in the manufacturing environment, that actually engineers pick up Mendix quite easily because of the visual modeling that's very close to how they think and how they operate. And so we see a lot of companies picking that up and solving problems within weeks, because they have the right approach. And that's really something we want to strengthen. I think if you look at democratization, I think low code is one, right? You have self-service BI. We see it more and more also in the analytics space, basically, where you see more and more democratization. But I think there's a true pivotal transformation happening within the enterprise. And this is really where you need to bring together kind of the people in your organization, so business and IT, but all the experts you have. And that's something we are heavily investing in from a Mendix perspective. So how do you build a community in your organization, right? How do you foster collaboration? How do you also end up with a portfolio in the end, right, of applications you can go after? Value today is definitely consumed through the forms of an application. But how do you get to that portfolio, right? How do you tap into that? And what we see working well is like a form of a hackathon. So we do that much more often with customers. We even see customers now posting on LinkedIn how how excited they are to see ideas kind of turning into a solution fairly quickly. And then I think that's the power. And then from there, you again can involve kind of pro developers who help you then take it really to a scalable level. But I think that initial ideation and the initial concept phase to get it to kind of a starting point is important. And then IT can definitely help to structure and scale those solutions like we see at Siemens.
You touched already a bit on analytics and aspects. We are a bit of a geeky AI podcast, right? So obviously, as software eats the world, low code dominates the software, and AI eats the world anyway, and is somehow included in bits and pieces and everywhere. What role does AI in machine learning play in the context of low code and or Mendix? Are there any aspects that you can share about projects or features? Do you have few on the role of machine learning in low code?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things. I mean, in the end, I think with every technology, the question is how can you consume it, right? And I think again, low code is a means to also basically consume the power of AI. But maybe if you look at Mendix per se, like how we use AI, I mean, we also use it as part of our product offering. We have something since actually 2021. We have AI Assist, or Mendix, we call it Mendix Assist in our platform, and this is really a family of bots as we call it. So we have a logic bot, we have a page bot, and a performance bot. And what it really does, it helps the developers in our development environment to do multiple things. It makes suggestions on how you design your page, right? It improves the performance of your application automatically. And it also improves the logic in terms of how you write code, or how you build your application in the end. And we want to take it even further, that it makes kind of suggestion on what, I talked about composability, right? So you could imagine that basically there's a recommendation that you should use that or this component actually to speed up your development lifecycle. So it's a lot about productivity, but it's also in the end about security, to make sure you have the right architecture in place, so that actually in the end both quality, you have the right quality, but also you can scale on the quantity side, because you basically abstract even further. I think that's really about technology like low code, but even AI does. It helps you to abstract further so that you can focus on the value adding tasks. So I think that's where we are at today. But there's also something kind of in the works. You were talking about machine learning. We're actually close to a GA of our machine learning toolkit. Will come in early 2023. And that's the first feature in the platform dedicated actually to building the next generation of applications. So really making it smarter, if you will. And it allows developers or you to incorporate actually machine learning algorithms into low-code applications without calling an external API. So you can basically use it within the application. And we hope that similar to AI, actually, that helps developers to build smarter applications, if you will. Yeah.
So that means so it's the current use of machine learning in Mendix is on the one side focused on recommendation, a bit of a companion, how to build code recommendation or composability recommendation, right? On the other side, you're releasing to be soon, I guess, then, right? Some kinds of that own machine learning models can be built, and helping data scientists to build first application using AI.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. That's pretty cool.
So hopefully you can check it out. But yeah, I think that's something. Again, it's about in the end building different kind of apps. I think we said both. I think that the democratization of on the people side led to building basically more diverse and inclusive apps, right? Because other people are participating in the application development lifecycle. But this also enables us to build smarter applications, if you will. And again, that should then propel actually the usage of AI and machine learning, if you will. But it also makes apps more intelligent, because now we have actionable insights, right? It's also more proactive, because you could basically use predictive algorithms to trigger certain workflows or actions, right? And it's more contextual, because you can personalize actually those applications, if you will. And then inside our organization, so not product, we use also different tools for sales forecasting. So basically where you analyze call scripts, where you analyze, okay, how many meetings you had. And we have certain parameters where we say, okay, this is actually where we think these are key criteria kind of closing an account. And then basically this is being analyzed. And then there's a prediction score in terms of how likely it is that this deal gets closed. And then I think it helped us in many ways. To become more precise in forecasting, which with my previous background is obviously something very interesting. But it also allowed us to be much more diligent and deliberate about following up with certain accounts. If we saw that scores are dropping, we actually had the ability now to engage much more. That could mean, okay, we got an executive in, or we were scheduling a reference call. So I think it's never about replacing a human, but it's helping to make the human more effective in the way you operate. And I think that is always something we have to have in mind. I mean, there are a lot of notions out there that low code, but also AI is disrupting, right, the workplace. But I think it actually helps you to, in the end, operate much more effectively and smart. And it should lead actually to a higher value work you can focus on.
But do you think that we will need, or is it even possible to say that we will need, for instance, more developers in the future, or that they will need a different skill set so they can help with the more complex tasks? Or do you foresee a development where everyone can build software applications because now we have platforms like Mendix out there?
Yeah, so I think everyone can become a developer. I don't think this is necessarily what we should strive for. I mean, there are a lot of no-code tools out there, right? But I still think that will at some point create its own legacy, right? Its own technical depth. And I think what we believe in from a Mendix perspective is this combination, what we call speed, um, control, and collaboration. So what do I mean by that? I think speed is really about, okay, through that abstraction layer, we definitely make it faster. But that doesn't mean that everyone should code, right? Or should become now an application developer. I think what the power is actually then in that collaboration aspect that you have. Maybe you can start ideating with a business user on a problem, and then to truly get it to scale, right? It should not only be a point solution. Ideally, it integrates into your existing architecture and it makes you smarter as an organization and more scalable as an organization. So I still think there will always be pro developers or pro users of low code platforms who need to basically do the last mile. But it's really about the last mile. When you were describing the higher value work, really perfecting it, if you will, right? So, and then the control aspect, I think, is super important. I mean, especially if you think about building applications in industries like life science or so, where there's a high regulatory aspect to it. You want to make sure that there's a certain governance around these applications, but there's also certain scalability involved, because you need to make sure there's an audit trail as you perform certain workflows. And so from that perspective, that governance piece becomes increasingly more important. And then, like I said, the collaboration should be a result out of that, because then business and IT truly come together.
It goes a bit in that direction. We asked a famous GPT machine learning system, released from OpenAI, ChatGPT, right, GPT 3.5, about what question we should ask you, right? And it came with a nice one, which maybe fits now in there. Can you share any insights or predictions about the future of AI and how it will impact the development of low code? Will AI be the next Excel?
It's an interesting question. I think in general, I think if you look at ChatGPT, it's I mean, if you look at the number of users it was able to accumulate, I think it's truly fantastic, right? There was some comparison how long it took Netflix to acquire this level of users, and I mean, the short time it shows like that. I think everything is shifting to digital, right? And obviously through that it becomes even smarter because of obviously a lot of people using it, but it also, I mean, I wanted to try it actually the other day, and then said like, okay, it's kind of reaching a capacity limit, so you should join later. But I think if I look at AI, I think like it should actually converge, meaning AI should be an embedded technology in low code platforms, right? So to make those low code platforms more effective and improve it from that perspective, but it should also help us to build smarter applications in the end. One of the examples I can reference is, for instance, Zurich. It's one of our largest insurance customers at Mendix, and they built an AI face recognition app. And what the application actually does, so it was meant to actually find net new customers for Zurich, right? They were concerned they didn't really perform, if you will, in the younger segment, and so they were thinking about, okay, how can they acquire a new customer segment, or how can they get access? And again, If you look at B2C, I think the way you're interacting today is through the means of an application. And they basically wanted to do the same in the business context. It's still B2C because obviously they were selling insurance to end users, if you will, or citizens. But they actually basically used Mendix application that where you take a picture and then based on an algorithm that analyzes kind of the age group and that it did a risk classification, and then you could basically sign an entire insurance policy through the means of an application. And I think this is really what it's about, right? Building smaller applications, and with that actually reaching maybe also certain aspects you were never able to do before. And then I think then there's still basically human interaction needed, both on the development side as well as on the end user side. But I think it truly shows how the adoption could be fueled, if you will. And I think that's true for technologies like AI. I think it's equally true for IoT, right? And if you think about these use cases, and then I think this is where we can help.
Speaking of help, right? One could see that the accessibility of app development and capabilities shaping and defining, but also initiating thing has also a role on job satisfactory. There is a Microsoft study that says 82% of low-code users agree that the technology helps, gives them software users to chance advance their technical expertise, blah, 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 and to it has a 83% good influence of job satisfactory and 80% positive impact on users' morality. That comes with a surprise, to be frankly, for me. I didn't relate like, people are more even, measurable on this kind of scale, 80%, this is significant, right? More happy when they can doing the use of low code. Is that a fake stats, or what's your feeling, right? Are your employees the most happiest employees in the world, or do you see the customers the most happiest customers in the world?
I don't know if the stat, right, if the 80% is now fully accurate, but I can share. I mean, I was basically explaining that the most rewarding part of the job is actually getting the feedback, right, from users or customers. I actually was probably now 4 weeks, 5 weeks ago here at a customer in Munich, and it was quite interesting. So they are signed basically with us maybe 6 months ago, and I was meeting two IT people, like basically responsible for executing the implementation of Mendix. And so the lady I talked to, she basically said, so she was IT and running program, and she was sharing the feedback she got from a user, saying that they were never imagine that basically IT can be that innovative in their company. But through the means of no code and actually getting into this iterative phase and showing results fairly quickly, they were actually able to innovate from within the IT function. And she was just happy. She was smiling and she was just proud. Well, the statement, you could say, had basically a set connotation, right? But that in the past, maybe it wasn't the case. She was actually quite happy that she's in a position, right, to deliver now. And the other IT manager said that he feels like that's the first time they are acting actually faster than the business. And I think if you think about this constant demand, that was the other question you asked, right? Will there? I think there will be ever more developers needed simply because the demand is increasing exponentially. But him making that statement, I think, is quite rewarding, and I think that is contributing to their job satisfaction. So I think on the IT side, is truly to become an enabler for business versus business prevention. I think that's the satisfaction IT has. I think from a business perspective, actually being able through the collaborative aspect to engage, right, and basically have their business expertise getting kind of ingrained in these applications, I think leads to satisfaction there as well, especially because of the speed, getting those results quickly, where they maybe in the past had to wait 12 months. So they all of a sudden have the ability to innovate and disrupt or differentiate with the offering. And then I think there's another aspect. I mean, with the rise of SaaS application, I think what also happened, there's a variety of user interfaces. And if you think about the normal business user, I think that it's quite overwhelming. I mean, sometimes I have it probably myself. I don't know how many applications I need to use to approve certain workflows. And if you now all of a sudden can actually consolidate all your workflows in one application because simply of the integration capabilities low code offers, I think it's also streamlining the way you operate as a business, which in the end leads to user satisfaction because you actually know exactly where you need to go, how a workflow is being executed, and also providing transparency what happens, right? Because you can actually show what is happening within the process in a visual way again. And that kind of leads also to trust and kind of also predictability, which ultimately, in my opinion, leads to user satisfaction.
So what's that like? You should hire highly innovative but lazy people who are there to automate their own jobs as soon as possible because that fuels some innovation. I'm not sure if this this hits the whale on low code.
Except for the lazy part, right? But I truly think that it. I think it encourages people to truly participate because they see a way, and I think this is always important for. I think creating engagement for me is also always about transparency and working on innovative stuff, right? I think at least for me that is what keeps me going, and I think that that's true for so many in the workplace, and especially that shift now that this is possible, where maybe people had 20, 30 years career, right? Type of careers. And now this is possible. I think that that's also a booster for a lot of them. The story I shared, I think that was the case. She was 30 years with the company, and all of a sudden, yay, it's possible, right? That's the magic.
Yeah, there is so much to that. I'm actually a little amazed right now. Like, I imagine a lot of people that have been in a certain position for so long, and then you have those ideas. I mean, you're the domain expert, you know everything about that field, but maybe you're like limited because you're lacking the technical expertise, the technical know how. And then you have to rely on others, on the IT department, or you have to hire an expensive external company so they can turn your idea and your vision into reality. And I feel like with low code platforms, on the other hand, it really enables you to have a real impact and to make a change. And next to that, I also really liked what you said about lifelong learning, so that those employees do not only advance in their day-to-day business, they also stay so competitive in the market. And that's what I liked a lot about what you just said.
Yeah, and then I think the other aspect, I mean, if you look at it, it's what happens within the company. But I mean, we also run, or someone in our community was running ChatGPT through the question, what is Mendix about, and what are the strengths of Mendix? And one of the answers was actually, it's the community, because you're tapping into this large community where you have users and developers who are experts, right? And it's a huge knowledge pool you can tap into, and through gamification, we also found a way, obviously, to drive interaction in that community, and it's really self-sustaining now. And I think that's the other element to it. You're not just in your company; you get actually access to a large community. Could be our partners, but could also be the developer community. And I think that that's the other part. And that's also what I see within Siemens actually happening, that we have that low code community, right? It's again, self-founding in its sense. But I think what this makes a difference also today in technology adoption. I think this community aspect, which allows us also, again, to become composable, because if they start to share in their community, that again, starts the flywheel, or keeps the flywheel spinning, if you will. And I think the community is really a large part of why new technologies such as low code can be successful.
You just mentioned community, and the community also plays a big role in our podcast. And this is why we reached out to the people out there listening to this podcast and collected some questions for the episode. And earlier, Uli already posed the ChatGPT question, but we also want to bring one up from a real person, from Thilo. Thilo, thanks a lot for engaging and sending us your question. And he asked, what is your view on the industrial metaverse and which role will low code and citizen AI play there?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what we discussed. Like, I think it's about technology adoption, right? And industrial metaverse again is this huge big thing, and I think it's hard actually for people to imagine what you can do, right? How you get started. And I think low code could be a means again to ideate on use cases in the industrial metaverse. If you think about it, again, it's about combining physical and virtual or digital, right, world for one. So the convergence of IT and OT play a big role there. But then again, you have to think about use cases to make it practical, to make it tangible for people buying into that concept. So, and I again think that low code could be a means through how you consume that technology, because in the end, it's not just about kind of combining digital and physical. It's also about how humans interact with that technology, right? It's about, okay, how do we make virtual reality basically consumable? So how can humans interact, right, communicate, but also control certain aspects? And I think, again, through the means of low code, that is one way how you could adopt and foster basically that industrial metaverse. And I see a lot of customers and companies kind of having this big vision. We had the notion of industrial clouds and all these aspects, but I think it always starts with a use case, and then you can think about how you basically um, scale that use case. You going into structure and scale phase, as we call it, and where we have multiple use cases then, and then maybe it culminates into a solution. And I think this is again what low code could offer, um, and it could be one of the interface how you consume the value of the industrial metaverse, because in the end it's about industrial applications and making it available for humans. That could be, right, a service engineer who needs to service a plant or a turbine, and then again through the means so that you can actually do it, yeah, basically in real time. But also about the feedback loop, right? It's about consuming it, but you also want to make it smarter in a sense. So I think you can also have the human feedback loop so that the human then can say, okay, it's a completely different scenario than I expected, or what have you. Yeah.
Time is flying actually, but we don't want to leave you, right, because without asking a bit about your experience and maybe your reflections, your path within Siemens and then to a acquisition, but also to a great company which scaled pretty hard in terms of value creation, but also in terms of people. That means you have quite some collected in a very compressed manner, quite some experience what actually means business and what means leadership as well, maybe also, right? Are there any advice, things you would give young folks out there as a recommendation, who are stoked about crazy ideas and, making a difference in the world? Is there some lessons learned you want to share?
Definitely. I felt like it was always about curiosity, right? I think if you're not curious about something, I think that actually prevents you to learn something, because no matter what great idea you have, I think throughout the process there will be so many learnings in order to truly perfect it, right? Find that product market fit or whatever you are after. I think you need to continuously be curious. If I think if you lose that, it's going to be very hard, I think, to be successful. And I also think that curiosity leads to passion. I think you need to be passionate about something as well, because you need to convince others of your idea, right? And you need to kind of impact them in a way so that they either join you, support you, or what have you, right? I think that's one. And I think the second thing is you need to be willing to be in uncomfortable situations. Sounds maybe strange, but I feel like the most challenging environments I was in, the most I learned. And I think going through this notion of being uncomfortable and maybe also sometimes sacrificing something is extremely important to succeed. And I think that you see that in so many areas where this is actually true, um, where people actually went through a difficult phase, but actually the constant feedback helped them to actually perfect their idea and then ultimately ultimately be successful. So I think this is what I would kind of give it as an advice: be curious, but also go through this phase of uncertainty, maybe being uncomfortable, and at the end of the tunnel, if you will, it will be truly rewarding if you do that, and you're actually proud of yourself at the end because you achieved something. So that would be my advice.
Tim, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure. I'm so hooked. I'm a real Mendix fan after this conversation with you today. And what stuck with me in particular was that ecosystem, community aspect, the democratization, and what you mentioned about making apps smarter, which can also largely boost the user experience and satisfaction in the end. Also, what you mentioned about starting with the user, I think this is so cool.
Maybe if I'm allowed, I would like actually to add on the community aspect, because there's something very very close to my heart. I mean, I was alluding to the fact that as Mendix, obviously we want to have an impact on organizations. So we just had our annual kickoff with kind of the Mendix organization, and we launched kind of a framework which extends that organizational aspect to people and society. And I want to explain that quickly before we wrap up, because I think this is very, very important. So if I talk about people, it's really about kind of what I said, giving people a new chance, maybe a new career, right? Or making them a change agent in their organization. And we even have organizations who build their entire business on the Mendix platform. So our partners, for instance, who basically, bet their life, if you will, and build a career on the Mendix platform. So being much more deliberate about how we impact people and their lives is one, and that extends then into society. So I was alluding to the fact that, okay, digitization drives an even bigger wedge into the society in terms of the gap, right? And we really think that there's the opportunity to drive equal opportunities for everyone. And I just want to give you a couple of examples to highlight that. So one of the organizations we work with in the Netherlands is called Motor. And Motor basically engages with municipalities in the Netherlands, and then tries to identify newcomers, so basically status holders, if you will, who are victims of war, so refugees, right, if you will, and gives them the opportunity to change their career trajectory they're on, by basically making them Mendix local professionals. And they are quite successful. They almost had 100 placements now, where they basically train refugees or status holders on Mendix. And then after a 12-month period with kind of an internship type of activity, they actually place those candidates then at one of our customers or partners. And very large organizations like Rabobank in the Netherlands, or PVH, which is organization, which is kind of the holding for brands like Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein, and these type of activities. So that's really cool to see, and this is changing basically the lives of people, right? And then the other element, we were talking about community. So we actually had, for the first time now, what we call Low Code for Good, which was a Mendix hackathon where we brought the community actually across the globe together to work on three projects. So APAC, EMEA, and the US. So we had Project Alianza in the US. We had New Hope service community in Singapore, and the Welcome app, which again was about how people with who are refugees are actually being integrated into society in the Netherlands. And we basically had 1,500 people participating. So the entire Mendix community in basically helping those nonprofit organizations to actually disrupt through digital solutions. And I think that shows the power, right? It's actually, there was no commercial transaction involved. It was just the power of the community, bringing people together, and then within a 48-hour time frame, actually working on these solutions and ideate on this problem statement. And it's truly amazing what kind of came out of that. And then I think what also kind of, at least in my opinion, shows the power of the Mendix community. We had partners picking this up now to really make it a production ready solution, so that these organizations can also truly benefit from it. It's not just an idea, it's actually going into execution phase now as well. And there will be more we're going to share about this in the near future. But that's really dear to my heart, and it shows what can be done in society as well if you put the right minds to it and bring truly the community together.
What a beautiful ending to this episode today. Thanks so much for sharing.
Not yet, not
Yeah,
yet.
let's
Right?
start off from the beginning, right? No, but Tim, it's been a real pleasure to have you. And before we let you go to your well deserved winter vacation, we want to play our finishing game, Authentic Autocomplete, with you. Let me give you a couple of sentence starters for the closing, and I would ask you to complete them. Tim, are you ready for the final challenge?
Of course.
Of course. So I'd suggest we start off with an easy one. So Mendix
Is the way how you can disrupt your existing landscape.
low code in 2030 will be.
The de facto standard how organizations build collaboratively software.
Agree. Technology with purpose is.
Yeah, it's really about thinking beyond short-term profit and the societal impact you had. I mean, I was just sharing that story. I think having that front and center is so important.
Beautiful. Having a growth mindset is.
An essential part of being a leader.
And last but not least, if I could invent one rule for everyone in the world to follow, it would be.
Embrace peace.
Tim, thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed it. So I was stoked, right? Who is Tim, right? But it's you're unfair, sympathetic. Yeah, it's really charming and really it rings directly, right? You're truly passionate and behind about the words and the aspects you see, and I can't wait to see where you pull and put the community and Mendix next, actually. So thanks so much for hanging around with us for quite some time before you go on your well-deserved vacation.
Yeah, really appreciate it. I mean, really enjoyed this session. Talking to you, but also being in that environment with you together. I think, especially at post-COVID, I think it's good to connect again, right, personally. It was a real pleasure, and thanks for the kind words and spending the time.
Here you go. And folks out there, stay bold, committed, and open-minded, and we hear us next Siemens AI Lab podcast. Cheers.